There's no true counterpunchers left except for Medvedev and de Minaur, and they're a new breed of counterpuncher. So the reason I think Andy Murray is struggling so much, and it's super cool because he talked about it just yesterday before I made this video out at Indian Wells, is the game has really changed. So
I've always struggled here during my career, but the court is definitely faster this year. Much prefer the conditions, and yeah, played.
When we look at Leighton Hewitt, he was his top ranking, if I'm going off my head here, to the side. I think he was in his top ranking in 2001, right? He was at his peak at his young age. We don't usually see that, but when you're really young. And then you had Guillermo Coria, I think he was around the 03 range, and we had Gilles Simon. He was a little bit later, and he was top 10 in the world. He beat Djokovic, Federer, and Nadal. And then we have David Ferrer, who was more recent. He's number 3 in the world forever. 2016 was his real last year before he dropped in the rankings. And then you have Andy Murray, of course, number 1 in the world for 41 weeks. And he dropped off after, I think the latest he had was a 2016 season. And so he talked about the last 5-6 years the game has really changed, and you see that through the rankings because all these guys started dropping off.
It's changed a little bit, I think, in the last sort of 5 or 6 years. With the way guys are, hitting the ball now, a lot of guys are really unloading. It wasn't like that when I started my career. And
so what changed? He didn't really talk about this, but the courts have really slowed down. The balls have gotten slower. They've gotten a little bit bigger. They fluff out a little bit more to combat the power game, right? So during the death of serve and volley, because the court slowed down a bit, it was also the death of the counterpunchers that grew up playing a certain way. Because when the counterpunchers like Hewitt's, the Simones and stuff, if you notice, they hit a bit flatter and the courts were a bit faster, so they could use the pace, and then the court would skid out on the other player and they attack that way. So when you look at those type of players, they like to take the ball earlier and stand closer into the baseline. Now in Andy Murray's last match, you see him pushing a little bit further back from the baseline, but he's so close to it. If you look at his prime against Djokovic and all them, he could take the ball earlier and use his counter-punching style that way. But now with these guys hitting bigger and bigger, he has to either move back, right? But in order to move back, what's he need that Medvedev and de Minaur have? He has to take bigger cuts at the ball. And like he said in this interview, that's not really his game, right? He's trying to mix it up. So that's why you see him struggling, as opposed to you saw Nadal, you saw Djokovic, Federer. They were able to adapt in their later years, and that's because they weren't true counterpunchers, right? Djokovic is, I would consider, more of an aggressive baseliner. Nadal, the same thing when he's nervous. Of course, he pulls up off the ball, and Federer, you got an all quarter. So how can Murray sort of adapt? I think he's got to stay back. I think he could still play pretty safe. He's just got to play a bit more like Medvedev. And, I don't know if I could find this article, but I was combing through stuff and I found that after his hip surgery, he was actually reporting faster court times, his sprint times, than before his hip surgery. So I don't think it has to do as much with that. I think it has to do with his style and then being able to adapt currently to what this game is. Because the courts being so much slower, for a counterpuncher, it's starting to just phase them out, because you have to be a new breed of counterpuncher, which is you have to be able to create your own pace off these balls because the court slows it down. So to counter a shot that's getting slowed down, right, if someone hits a really fast ball and then it hits the court and slows down, now you don't have that pace anymore to rip through. And especially if you stay back more, now you have to generate even more force to keep the ball deeper. So that's what I'm seeing, and that's, I think, why we're getting more and more all-court type of players, more aggressive baseliner type of players, and unfortunately, just one style of play. And instead of counterpunchers, aggressive baseliners, all-quarters. So, hopefully they'll make some changes in the future. We'll see how it goes, but that's my take on why Andy Murray is struggling. Till next time, guys.